Oh, we're going to have an air compressor at some point too.
That's okay.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Straight from the Horse Doctor's Mouth. This is a video production of our podcast. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, we wanted to try to get it out to you in a way that you would understand what a podcast is and what we're doing here. So, generally, we don't have the camera going, but everything else is the same. We sit here and have a conversation about a variety of topics, talk into the microphone and record it, and then you can play that recording in your car or over
While
your
you're
phone,
riding.
yeah, whatever you happen to be doing, and you don't have to watch what's happening. You can just listen to the conversation. So that's the general idea of the podcast here. So today we are going to record the video and the podcast at the same time. So you're going to get the unedited version on the video, and the part that goes out in the podcast, we're going to cut out all the ums and spaces and all that. That's unnecessary and just a waste of time. So just to try to make it shorter. So
Potentially the cat helping.
yeah, there's bound to be a cat involved in this at some point.
Yeah.
So possibly a dog. So anyway, we are going to start the recording. And here goes the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Justin Long. I'm here with the amazing horse doctor, Dr. Erica Latcher. Hello, Dr. Latcher.
Hello, Justin Long.
Today we are on, I think this is the beginning of season 2, episode 1.
Woohoo!
Yes, we have finally made it to 2019. We are very excited about that. We want to thank everybody who's been with us all the way. We've got people all over the country. I think we're in all 50 states now and like 42, 43 countries around the world. We
That's pretty exciting.
had our first download in Venezuela this weekend, so that's exciting.
Ooh.
Forgot to tell you about that. So it's growing, and so we wanted to take a minute and thank everyone for making that happen. It's very exciting. So, and for participating in our goal, which is, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, to make the world a better place for horses. So the more people, the more better we're doing. So we're very excited about that. So today we are talking about deworming, which I have often heard called worming or other strange things. You don't want to worm your horse. You want
No, we prefer to deworm horses.
Try to make them go away. So we'll get the verbiage right at the beginning as best as we can. So
We will, yes.
we'll talk about deworming horses, and this also applies to donkeys, correct? Donkeys and
It
horses,
does.
same plan.
Same plan for all equids. There's a little bit of differences between donkeys and some of the zebras. We see a couple of those.
Right, we have a few.
They're a little bit different, but we follow the same basic game plan and then tweak it from there.
Okay. Now, does it matter where you are in the country or in the world, or does the concept stay the same?
The concept stays basically the same no matter where you are in the world. Some places are more susceptible to parasite burdens than others, depending on density of the horses and how they're managed. Believe it or not, high intensity situations where the horses are managed in stalls a lot have a much lower worm burden than where horses are outside in pastures. So,
Interesting.
yeah, some of that depends, but the basic critters involved are the same.
Okay. So I understand that the approach that we have to handling this is not the way that it has always been. How did it used to be, and what's changed and why?
Well, it used to be that every time the farrier came, or you put a new month on the calendar, or the moon was full, or the moon was not full, or you felt like it, you put a dewormer in there. And that was not a great plan for the long term. The other thing that we had was, we'll rotate dewormers. So there's about 4 different classes of dewormers that are available, and we will rotate them. So we'll give an ivermectin now, and then we'll give a panicure, and then we'll give a safeguard, and then we'll give an anthalcide. And that way we're going to rotate the dewormers, but we're still going to give one about every month to 6 weeks.
Right.
And that's going to be how we manage the parasites in these horses. That's not a great plan.
How come?
It turns out that is a great way to create resistance in parasites. So now, every time they see one of our dewormers, they go, oh yeah, got that. I'll just eat that for lunch and move on.
So it's sort of like drug resistance in people then.
Exactly. It's very similar to the antibiotic drug resistance.
Right.
That is a huge problem in hospitals for people.
So we've created the same thing in horses?
We have.
Ah, that's
Yes.
not good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other reason that resistance is a huge problem with parasites in horses is that we don't have new drugs coming. So there's basically no new drugs in the research pipeline, which means that if we lost control of parasites through dewormer products today, it would be about 10 years before we had any options.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time. And
That's,
a lot can change in the bug world in 10 years, right?
yes, a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Now, many of us, including me, are not old enough to remember when large strongyles in particular were a problem. Those parasites would climb up the blood vessels to the small intestine, and they would create essentially what we see in strangulating lipomas now, where we would have huge sections of the small intestine that would die. And so those horses would have to have colic surgery, basically take out giant sections of the small intestine. And that is one of the most complicated filled colic surgeries for horses.
Right.
You know, like there's a lot of complications in surgery, after surgery. They're very sick horses. So the fact that we've eliminated that is a good thing. I don't want to see it come back, and I know no other veterinarian does either.
Right.
So.
Okay. So I think basically this means that we have to get this under control then.
We do. Well, we need a better plan.
Okay. And how are we going about that?
Well, first off, we are utilizing oh, here comes a cat. There we go.
There's the promised cat.
Yep. We are utilizing a weird little word called refugia.
Refugia?
Refugia, yeah.
Okay, what is refugia?
Refugia is a little bit of a difficult concept, but it's basically that we always need a small amount of parasites in the horses who are best able to manage their parasite loads. So those horses who are immune competent and can deal with the parasites in their GI tract should be minimally dewormed so that they keep that little tiny bit of parasite load in there.
So we're not trying to go to zero load then?
No, we're not trying to go to zero at all.
Oh, okay.
And what those parasites do is they stay... There goes the cat. What we do with those parasites is they don't develop resistance to dewormers if we don't deworm that horse. So if we only deworm them when we absolutely have to, and other than that, we expose them to very, very, very minimal amounts of dewormers, then those worms don't learn how to manage those drugs. So our goal is that that horse actually reproduces parasites in a small amount, so that if those parasites who aren't resistant see other parasites that are resistant and they have babies, those babies will not be resistant. So that's how we keep that not resistance in the population of parasites.
So how long of a period of time does it take for like repeated exposure? Are we talking like if we do once a year, they're not going to build resistance?
It depends on the parasite. Ascarids can develop, which is a common parasite in the youngsters. Ascarids can develop resistance very quickly, like within a season. So if you over deworm one season with one particular product, you're looking at developing early signs of resistance the next year, and by 3 years from now, you have full and complete resistance.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The strongyles take a little bit longer, but they can do it pretty fast too. So, you know, we're talking about a farm, you know, for instance, our farm we've lived on for 13 years, I think. I'm not very good at how long, but it's been a while. We could have easily developed resistance on this farm that quickly, just with the horses we have, and we have a relatively closed herd.
Right.
We don't have a lot of horses in and out. Now imagine like a thoroughbred breeding farm where you have mares and foals coming and going and being exposed to all different types of management off your farm versus on your farm.
Now explain the difference between like a closed system. Say we've got 2 horses in the back pasture that never go anywhere. Are they going to be more of a problem for this or less than ones that see other horses all the time?
It depends on their parasite load.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's not a clear, simple answer.
No, there's not a clear, simple answer.
I should have known.
And that's where there's a lot of companies out there that offer, you know, send us your horse's poop and we will formulate a plan for you.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a recurring theme here. You should have a great relationship with your veterinarian, because that's who is best situated to discuss your horse's lifestyle, your property, your lifestyle, and come up with the best deworming plan for your farm.
Okay. So, so how do you start something like that? How do you make an assessment?
The first thing we recommend is doing a fecal egg count on every equid on the property. Donkeys are super important to do fecal egg counts on as well. As we talked about in the donkey episode, They are a little more susceptible to parasites than horses. They don't have as good a resistance to the parasites naturally.
Right.
So it's really important that you check them for their parasite load. And we often recommend that we check donkeys more frequently. But as a baseline, we recommend getting a fecal egg count on everybody on the farm and seeing where we're at.
Okay, so let me spit that out twice.
And that will be cut in the podcast.
So you make an adjustment to your approach depending on whether they are a high shedder or a low shedder?
Yeah, we mostly divide them into high versus low. And high is anything over 350 eggs per gram. So we take that poop, we bring it back to the clinic, we weigh it, we put some stuff with it, we spin it, then we let it sit. Then under a microscope, we look at how many eggs we have. And I'll tell you that probably 85 to 90% of the equids we see are less than that 350. And in fact, most of them are less than about 50.
Wow, so that's very low then.
It is. It's really, really, really low. And those horses, they don't need to be dewormed for the most part. We'll get to that in a second. But they should not be hit on that once a month every time the farrier comes when the moon phase changes. You know, they really should not be hit with that. Those are the horses that we should really be using that refugia in those horses,
right, to
keep those non-resistant parasites alive.
So is 50 a good number for that?
50 is a great number.
Okay, so that's not too low.
No. That means that there's a little bit going on in there, but not a ton. And this is in adult horses. Now, in horses who are less than 6 months old, the difference is that we're looking at more of an ascarid population. In the adult horses, we're looking at more of a small strongile population. In the young horses, we do essentially a deworming program on them that is a little bit timed. So we hit them with one drug. We do not deworm them before they are 90 days of age. So we hit them with a drug at 90 days. We hit them with a drug at 6 months. And then 2 to 3 months after that, we do a fecal egg count on them. Because the difference in youngsters is that somewhere in that 6 to 10 month period, they're going to switch over from being a primary ascarid infection to small strongyles. The immune system does a really good job fighting ascarids once the immune system kind of kicks in and gets going. So that is one where we will talk to the farm in particular about what they have done for their deworming program prior to that, because there is a little bit of decision making that has to go into what drugs are used on those foals and what order we use them in as the youngsters.
Okay.
But fecal egg counts don't work great on youngsters because we can have a high ascarid load without having a lot of the eggs passing out the manure.
Interesting.
So there's other ways that we'll check them, but very important that you address your babies, but again, don't over address them.
Where are they picking this stuff up? How do they go from one type to the other? Dirt.
Yep.
Okay, so that's just part of the environment.
Yep, that's being a horse.
Okay, so what do we do next?
So we've got our fecal egg count, and we say, all right, we're going to take our property, for instance, just because it's easy, and here comes the cat again, because you can never have too much help from the cat. So on our property, for instance, we have 7 horses, 2 donkeys right now.
Right.
We have 1 high shedder, and that is Stitches. Everyone else is a low shedder, which probably has to do with the fact that everyone else is in the barn for a good portion of the day. The less exposure they have to outside, the less exposure they have to parasites. We also have horses who are on a good diet plan, so they're on good food, good hay. That helps their immune system combat things. You can't really 100% count on that to do what you need, but Stitches probably just doesn't have a very good immune system in terms of fighting parasites. So that's why she has a high count.
Right.
So we will then only deworm those low shedders. So those 6 others get dewormed once a year in the fall with a praziquantel containing product. So that is going to be in the United States, either Equimax or Quest Plus. Now, Quest has a little bit of a bad rap. It's not deserved. You just want to be careful that you give it to the weight of your horse. And that's where weight tapes can help you. Also, your veterinarian can help you formulate a plan for your farm. But in Florida in particular, and honestly in most of North America, this can change for the different areas of the world. But if you are shooting for as the temperatures are cooling down, so fall in your area, that is the end of the natural life cycle of the parasites. So by only hitting them at that time, you're kind of hitting them on the way down, and you're not giving them all that time naturally to see the drug and figure out how to deal with it. So, if you hit them when they're young and healthy in the spring, they're going to be better able to take that drug in, figure out what to do with it, and formulate resistance.
Oh.
If you hit them when they're in their senior years, which for them is in the fall, 1 year lifespan, if you hit them then, they're not as able to manage the drug and figure out how to resist it.
So they die off on their own every year then?
They do. You won't necessarily get a full die off, but you'll get a pretty significant drop in the fall.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's taking advantage of the life cycle of the parasite to use your drug smart.
Okay.
And then our donkeys. The donkeys for us, one is a high shedder, one is a low shedder. So our high shedders, we recheck in the spring to make sure that they've kept that high shedder status. Please stand by while I put the cat down. Unwillingly. So the donkeys, one is a high shedder, one is a low shedder. So our high shedders, so our two high shedders, we recheck fecals in the spring and we see where they are. If they are high in the spring, we're going to deworm them again in the spring.
Are the numbers the same for a donkey as they are for a horse?
They tend to be. We really find that if you're a low shedder, you're pretty much a low shedder. If you're a high shedder, we'll put that microscope slide on and there's parasite eggs everywhere.
Gotcha.
It seems like there are very few that are in that gray zone in the middle.
Now this is completely off topic, but I want to ask you while I'm thinking about it. Stitches is also our super itchy horse that has the bug allergies, the gnat allergies. Do you think that's related?
That's a difficult question to answer, but her immune system obviously doesn't work quite right? Like it sees gnats and says, oh my God, I must destroy self in order to manage this little tiny bite from an insect.
Right.
So there isn't great association between that, but it's certainly that her immune system doesn't work quite right. So that may be a factor.
Interesting thought.
Yeah, it is definitely heritable to some extent. It's complicated. It's not like you can do a genetic test and just know that this horse is going to be a high shedder. For instance, we've had 5 half siblings. One of those still holds the record for highest fecal egg count in the practice.
Not a good record to have.
No, and he was the fattest, shiniest horse on the farm at the time we pulled the fecal egg count. So that's important to remember, that hair coat and hair quality doesn't necessarily reflect fecal or parasite load.
Oh, that is important to understand.
But his 4 half siblings have never been high shedders.
Very strange.
So you got to blame his dad there because they all had the same mom.
Right.
So genetics almost certainly plays a role. It's just not a super clear role.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say we've done our fecal egg count. How do you determine which product to use?
Essentially, the answer for us on adult horses is ivermectin.
Okay, and we're looking to do that once a year.
We're looking to do that once a year if at all possible.
Okay.
If we need to do it more often than that, we will do an ivermectin again in the spring, but we try not to deworm them any more often than that. Now, let's say we do that fecal egg count, we deworm them, we do a repeat fecal egg count for some reason. Back up for a second. So we do that fecal egg count, we have a high shedder, we deworm them. We come back in the spring, we have a high egg count again, we deworm them. On a lot of those spring ones, we'll do what we call a fecal egg reduction test. So we give them the ivermectin, we recheck that fecal again in 2 weeks. That number should go down by about 90%.
Wow.
If it doesn't go down, we know we have resistance.
Okay, so what do you do at that point?
That's when I call in the experts, and that's usually a really, really, really awesome guy up at the University of Kentucky Gluck Center for Equine Studies.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where I will use them to say, is this actual resistance or do we have something else going on? For instance, we had a horse once where we were very concerned about resistance. We were, we gave the product and it was an ivermectin, which we shouldn't have had resistance to. That one, we have reports of it, but it's the lowest one. In our population of horses, they are not intensively managed for the most part. So we honestly haven't seen resistance in our population yet. I better knock on wood, pet cat. So we were surprised when we did a reduction test on that horse and it didn't reduce. We dewormed it again. We got no reduction. We said, okay, we are going to come out and deworm this horse with, we actually went to moxidectin at that point to ensure that we get a drop, or to ensure that the product is going into the horse. Like that way there's no question about the product going into this horse. So we gave moxidectin and the fecal egg count went to 0 2 weeks later.
Wow.
Yeah. Unlikely that we had ivermectin resistance and then got that reduction. So we came back in the fall, tested that horse again. It had a high egg count. Owner gave an ivermectin. Now these were all ivermectins they had purchased from a mail order catalog when they were on sale for $1.99 a tube. They were in date. They were all of the things that they should have been. So there's, I don't know if something happened in storage.
Right.
But they gave their ivermectin. We got no drop. We came back and gave an ivermectin again. So, we made sure the ivermectin went in the horse. And the owner was also, she was very hyper aware of this at this point. So we know the ivermectin went in the horse the first time, but we were like, you know what, let's just make sure. Because we had parasitologists interested at this point.
Right.
So we gave that ivermectin, and again, we got a drop. Now, this was a brand new ivermectin that we had bought through one of our veterinary distributors and given the horse. So, we don't know what happened, but she stopped ordering them in the $1.99 special, and that was probably 8 or 9 years ago, and we have not had a problem on that farm with ivermectin resistance.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah, so it might be resistance, it might be administration, it might be product.
Okay, so we don't make assumptions right off the bat.
We don't, and that's where, like I said, we usually get a parasitologist involved and say, where would you like us to go next, so that we make the best possible drug decisions on these horses.
Okay, so if you have one that's always a low shedder, if you've got the 50, do you even deworm them at all, or do you just let them go?
One of the biggest reasons we'll deworm them once a year, and that is probably going to change a little bit soon, to be honest, is a parasite called tapeworms. And in horses, we don't have a great way to test for tapeworms. They don't always pass their eggs reliably. Strongyles are really nice in that they're sort of our sentinel species. We see how many of these are in here. And they have a very reliable life cycle where they're passing eggs on a very regular basis. So we can always check for them and know where we are in terms of a worm burden.
Right.
Tapeworms don't do that. They do this sort of sudden release of eggs. And if you don't happen to catch them in the manure that day, you won't know that they were there.
Okay.
Now, there are tests that are being developed to say, does this horse have antigens in their bloodstream to tapeworms? And they're working on, can we look at those tests and say, oh, this horse has 100 tapeworms, this horse has 1, and can we then deworm them appropriately? The good news about tapeworms is that they have a very long life cycle. So their life cycle takes that full year to really complete. And if you have a long life cycle, it is much harder for you to develop resistance than if you have a very short one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is it safe to assume that most horses have tapeworms then? Is that how we're banking on this?
No, they don't all have them. They may all have them at some point in their life, but they don't all have them. The biggest problem is that where tapeworms live is where the small intestine meets the cecum and the large colon, and they're very irritating. So if you see a horse with tapeworms right there's redness and irritation, and they lead to gas colics of not real clear origin.
So we just don't want to take chances with that.
Yeah, and they can also cause a surgical colic called a ceco-ileal intussusception, which is a big long word for this.
That's a
the
good word.
cecum goes inside out and goes in the small intestine.
That seems like a bad plan.
It is.
All right.
So because we're not hitting them with the drug a lot and they have a very, very, very long life cycle, we worry less about resistance to that one. But it's why you shouldn't be giving a praziquantel product more than once a year. You absolutely do not need to give it more than once a year.
Okay. All right. Where does that take us?
That takes us to non-drug management.
Non-drug management.
Otherwise known as the environment.
How do we handle that?
Rotating pastures, resting your pastures, dragging your pastures, really minimizing places where parasites can hang out. And you can also rotate species.
Like bringing in cows and sheep and that kind of thing?
Yep. So
okay.
Cows, sheep, goats share parasites to some extent because they basically have the same GI tract. One's bigger than the other, but essentially it all works the same.
Right.
They don't share parasites with horses. And so you can rotate species in a pasture and break the life cycle of the parasites for both species.
How long does it take to do that? How long do you need to have one off of the pasture and the other one on?
It's a little bit harder for the cow and goat side of things. Like they need to be off longer and it doesn't work as well with them. But with horses, if you rotate about every 6 to 8 weeks with a species, you can break the life cycle.
Okay. Now we drag our pastures. Got the big rack thing that we drag behind the tractor. What exactly are we trying to accomplish when we do this?
So when we do that, and we ideally do it when the temperatures are hot, which is why parasites can be a bigger problem in cold areas. But for us, when temperatures go above 85 degrees, and in particular when it's really sunny for even just a few hours, if we drag the pastures, we break up the manure piles, which is where the parasites have their eggs, and we expose them to temperature and bright light, and they don't like either of those things.
Okay.
So we do that. We also, we grow some grass in the summer.
Absolutely.
And we get those grass mats where we've mowed the pasture, or you get the roughs where the horses defecate and they don't graze as well, so the grass is taller.
Yep.
You get a lot of mat underneath that, and that's dragging just brings all that up so that they're more exposed to sunlight and heat.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what dragging the pastures does. Now, what you don't want to do ideally is drag your pasture and turn your horses back out in it.
You need to give it some time.
Yeah, so our rotation normally, as you know, is we pull the horses onto a new pasture, we drag the old pasture, we try to do it around some rain because then the rain helps kind of beat the manure piles into submission. So we try to do it around some rain coming, and then we let that pasture sit for 4 weeks.
Is there an ideal amount of time? I mean, we do that based on the number of pastures that we have, and we have a constant rotation going. But in an ideal situation, how long would it be?
How long would the pasture rest, or how long between?
Yeah.
The pasture should rest for at least 4 weeks.
Okay. So, but longer doesn't really make it better?
Nope.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I was trying to get to. I didn't spit it out very well. Okay. Other forms of management on the pastures.
The biggest thing is making sure that you don't have too many horses for your pasture, or if you do, that you rotate your pastures quickly. So let's say you can't give your pastures a full 4 weeks off because you just don't have enough pasture space for that. One of the things you can do is bring your horses into a smaller area in a pasture with like hot wire. We have those step-in T-posts and hot wire. As long as your horses are hot wire savvy, you can run hot wire across, bring your pastures smaller, and keep them in a smaller area for 2 weeks, move them over for 2 weeks, move them over for 2 weeks. But you're better off giving them kind of frequent rotation if you don't have space than you are not resting your pastures at all.
Okay. Now, if you only have one pasture, say it's not very big, and it's what you've got, and you pick it, is there anything that you need to do besides picking it every day?
There's not much you can do, but I would pick it and I would drag it. And I would drag it, what I would try to do is drag it like in the morning early, let the sun be on it all day with no horses on it, and see if you can get some good kill that way.
Okay.
The other thing you can do to help is add another species in there if possible. Right now we are undergoing a great sheep experiment here, but sheep and goats in particular in small acreage, you can have, a couple of sheep or goats. And what they'll do is they will go eat the areas where the horses defecate and create those, what we call roughs, which is where the grass is tall. They'll go eat that. And the horses will eat where the sheep defecate.
Interesting.
So you get a whole circle of life thing going.
Well, I will say the sheep have done a pretty good job of de-weeding our pastures too, because they eat just about everything.
They do, yeah. But they're not so keen on the grass, which is great.
That's great, yeah.
So a couple of things though that do not work for parasites.
This is important.
Yes. Herbal dewormers.
Herbal dewormers?
Yeah, that's usually nicotine.
Okay.
And diatomaceous earth.
Does not work.
Does not work.
Oh my goodness.
I had the sad occasion to see a donkey that had such an overwhelming parasite burden that we lost her to starvation. And she was being exclusively dewormed with diatomaceous earth and nicotine.
That's not good.
So the theory is the diatomaceous earth will scratch the surface of the parasites and expose them to the intestinal forces, you know, the acid.
And all that.
Ooh, sorry. It doesn't work. Like it really, really, really doesn't work. And I cannot stress enough that diatomaceous earth does not work for that. It also does not work for fleas, but that's off topic. But using the drugs we have judiciously, and if you don't want to use drugs, managing your pastures intensively is the best way to prevent parasites. Going to these herbal dewormers and diatomaceous earth will not work.
All right. Well, I think that going from 6 or 8 dewormings a year down to 1 will probably help the pocketbook if that's the goal in trying some of these other forms anyway. So.
Yeah, it does all the things, right? It helps the pocketbook, which with horses, we all know we need that.
That's a rarity.
Yeah, it reduces their exposure to drugs. It's good for everybody involved. So
right. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
All right, bottom line, what do we need to go out the door?
We need to be doing fecal egg counts on horses, in particular in the fall, and recheck again in the spring if you've got a high shedder. But if in doubt, start with a fecal egg count program and then tailor a deworming program to your farm, your lifestyle, your horses.
Now, most veterinarians will do the fecal egg count.
Oh, I know very few who won't do a fecal egg count. So.
All right. Very
Nothing
good.
more fun than playing with poop in a microscope. That's what we went into this for, you know?
Right, exactly. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I happen to know exclusively that Tony has blogged on this more than once.
He has.
So if you would like to read up on some more specifics on this, you can go to springhillequine.com, and up in the menu bar is Tuesdays with Tony, and that is Tony's blog. Tony is our clinic cat.
This helpful cat here is not Tony.
Yeah, this is not Tony. Tony's at the clinic busy working on a blog right now as we speak. So this is Ari, and he's just trying to be in the middle of stuff because that's what he does.
Exactly.
So, but we also have a very interesting video on our YouTube channel about deworming and how we go through the process of doing the count. So it's called the Technician Edition, and there is a full-on video. I believe that one's also on our website under the videos.
I believe
on videos
it is.
page.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to see how we do a fecal egg count, there's a whole video on that. It's also good stuff.
Deworming is a subject that is near and dear to our hearts.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's one that I think there's a lot of misinformation about. So hopefully we've managed to clear some of that up.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Dr. Latcher. I appreciate all the knowledge you have shared with us once again, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
And that's how we record a podcast.
That is a podcast. So, yes.
If you want no coughs, the cat not in the middle of it, all of that, then you can look for it on your favorite podcast listening app.
Or you can go right to our website. On the menu bar, there's a button called Podcast. You just click on that, and then you can go through our entire library of podcasts and click on play, and it will play right over your phone or your computer. If you're hooked up to your car by Bluetooth or whatever, it'll play over your speakers. It's just as easy as it could be. So we hope you enjoy it, and we hope you subscribe and share it with your friends. Let everybody know. So thanks a lot for hanging out with us.